assistant sports editor for the Chronicle, so we're just going to jump right into it. Fall sports, not happening. Was that the right move for the Pac-12? Cole, take it away.
Absolutely not. The decision to cancel fall sports to me just seemed like there was a huge lack of effort on the conference's end of trying to put together a plan in which fall sports would take place. And the thing I worry about most is how are the athletes going to play 2 seasons in 2021 with a potential of a spring season and a fall season, as well as what are going to be some of the financial repercussions that take place because of this.
Honestly, I think this was the smartest idea that the Pac-12 has had in a while. They've cited a lot of things that like the Big Ten also cited. The heart condition, the testing protocols. It was the smartest thing to do. You don't know how this is going to react. And especially we're seeing that like as these colleges are reopening now, a lot of these students aren't taking things seriously. Like in Tuscaloosa, there's pictures of big parties happening and stuff like that. So I think it was the smartest idea because as much as these athletic trainers and these coaches can keep these players safe, you don't know what Tommy in the in-person business class that Britton Covey has, if he's been following safety protocols, if he's been wearing a mask, like you don't know what he's doing. So
yeah, no, that's absolutely a valid point. You know, it's a much different situation than, you know, professional sports, you know, an NBA bubble, an NHL bubble. It's a lot easier to control what's going on. A bubble doesn't seem exactly possible with collegiate sports, but to me, I just feel like they didn't really try to put anything into place to make any sort of plan to put in any sort of regulations or really even attempt to make a season happen. And I really worry about the effects that's going to place on college sports, on the NCAA and the conference as well, and just how much money is probably going to be potentially lost. I mean, are we looking at how legitimate is our 2 seasons for the year of 2021? You know, when would you start the spring season, and how long of an off season are you really going to be able to provide for these players before they start the fall season?
Yeah, and you can't start a season in April or in March because the NFL has already stated that they're not going to be moving their combine, they're not going to be moving the draft, and then you have those kids who are going to opt out of the season if it starts in March or April. So I think honestly the best thing to do is do a condensed season. There's no way they're going to play 10 games, maybe not even they're not even probably going to be able to play 12. I would say 8 games is probably the the sweet spot of like games that they can play because you got to think about inclement weather conditions, especially here in Utah when it can snow. Like it snowed the day after I was born in May. So it's like you got to learn about these inclement weather, and especially with teams like Colorado, Utah, Washington, you don't know what the weather's going to be like.
Exactly. And that's my worry is when can you legitimately start a season? I mean, you can go to the athletes and you can say, all right, January, as soon as the semester starts, week 1, you know, we're going to have football. But I don't think that's the best idea. Sure, you know, in the fall, you know, you've got games in October and November that, you know, there's plenty of snow. I mean, oftentimes Utah's playing Colorado, and regardless of where the game is, there's a few feet of snow on the ground. But starting in January just doesn't seem possible to me. And so I think the latest the earliest you probably want to start is maybe early February, mid-February. And yeah, you're right, Sammy. You're going to have to play a condensed season, 8 games probably max, because if you're not able to do that, there's not going to be an off season for these guys. And what kind of a quality season are we going to have in the fall of 2021?
But I think also playing in the spring brings up the point about what about early enrollees for like the kids that sign in December, their NLIs and their early enrollees. Should they be allowed to play in the spring? Because if this was a normal situation, they would be allowed to practice in the spring, but would they be allowed to play? I don't think it's fair to let them play because if in reality, if you think about it, they'd get 5 seasons. So you'd get the spring season, and then if they play again in the fall, you're going to get the fall season. Plus, if they stay all 4 years of their time at Utah, they're going to get upwards of 5 seasons. So I don't think it's fair that you let if they're an early enrollee, if they play in the spring, they shouldn't be allowed to play. They should be allowed to practice, but not play.
Well, do you think that the conference is going to be looking at an issue where they might have, some guy, I mean, look at some of the seniors, going into their senior season. are they going to want to play in the spring with the combine not too far off and a potential to be drafted? Are they going to accept that extra year of eligibility? So are we going to need those new signees? Are you going to need to play those guys because you might be looking at roster issues?
Yeah, and I think that also goes to like which juniors, if juniors are eligible to declare, are they going to declare? Because then you're going to get into scholarship count issues, and then this whole thing is just it's setting up to be kind of a big mess if you really think about it, because you're going to have the scholarship count issues. You're going to have to decide if it's even worth it to play in the spring, or even if they should just do just a regular spring camp and shoot for the fall. There's still so many questions. This is just turning into like a big mess. And honestly, it's going to be really interesting to see how the NCAA, or if the NCAA says anything about anything going on with this, how they're going to react.
Yeah. So if you do a spring season, I think there needs to be an attempt at some sort of bubble. We don't know exactly where things are going to be with COVID. They could be the same as today. They could be completely different. What kind of impact is a vaccine going to have? When's a vaccine going to be available? And so, is there a possibility to do maybe, to split the conference in half, north and south, have those teams play each other, and then maybe rotate 3 of the teams so that you get about an 8-9 game season. And it's not just north and south. You've got a little bit of a mix. Plus, like you said, Sammy, it's really going to be difficult to watch these guys. What are these college athletes doing when they're not out on the fields? Playing their games. Are they going to parties? Are they like you mentioned earlier? There was issues with athletes going to clubs and bars and tons of them coming down with COVID. So how do you control that? I think the Pac-12 and conferences all over the nation are going to need to look at some sort of bubble, at least for football, because I think there's too many potential issues that would arise if you're not controlling what's going on off the field for these athletes.
But where do you put the bubble cities? Because if you really think about it, the Pac-12 has 2 states that are really high in cases right now, in California and Arizona. You obviously aren't going to put your bubble cities in those 2 places. So then do you put it in Boulder? Do you put it here in Salt Lake? Because Salt Lake has proven that they can host professional sports. The NWSL tournament was in a bubble here in Salt Lake. The Professional Lacrosse League from the US was also here in Salt Lake. So Salt Lake has proven that they can handle having a bubble city. I've heard people talk about Seattle. So where do you put these bubble cities? Because it's going to need to be a place that the rewards outweigh the risks, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you've got to have somewhere that permits it weather-wise, that caters to having a bunch of athletes come in. And I agree with you. I think Utah, Salt Lake City could be a place to bring, maybe the Pac-12 South. And maybe you do look at Seattle or Portland to take the North. But I worry about college football. I worry about what it's going to look like, even though they did push off fall into potentially into spring. I just don't know exactly where you go with that and how you make a season happen and how you make 2 seasons happen in the same year. That's the biggest reason that I think this wasn't the best decision. Obviously, we're worried about making sure that these athletes are healthy and safe, but at the same time, you got to try to do something. There's too much at stake. There's not only for the athletes, but as well, money wise. I mean, the University of Utah, I was reading the other day, it looks like they're going to lose $60 million because there's not going to be any fall sports.